Daniel had spent most of his life traveling the rough lands of the Arizona frontier, moving from ranch to ranch and doing whatever work came his way. People knew him as a quiet, honest cowboy who kept to himself, someone who spoke little but did his duty with full heart. His closest companion was his horse, a strong and loyal animal that had followed him across deserts, through storms, and into lonely mountains where few people went. For Daniel, the land felt like home, even though it often demanded more strength than he thought he had. One late afternoon, the sky had turned a dusty orange when Daniel guided his horse along a narrow trail carved into the side of a steep mountain ridge. He had taken this trail before, but recent rains had weakened the ground. Loose rocks shifted beneath the horse's hooves, and the path crumbled a little with every step. Daniel leaned forward and whispered softly to calm the animal. He did not want to stop. He hoped to reach a small camp before nightfall, but the trail was more dangerous than he realized. Without warning, a large section of the path gave way. Daniel felt the world drop under him as both he and his horse slid toward the edge. The horse tried to dig its hooves into the dirt, but the ground broke apart like dry clay. Daniel grabbed the reins and held on with every bit of strength he had. The horse let out a terrified cry as they both tumbled over the edge and fell into the ravine below. Branches scraped Daniel's arms, rocks slammed against his legs, and the air rushed past his face. He tried to protect his head, curling his body, but the fall was violent and unforgiving. When he finally hit the bottom, the breath was knocked out of him. His horse landed a short distance away, struggling but still alive. Daniel tried to move, but sharp pain shot through his ribs and leg. The sky above him spun in circles, and everything slowly faded to darkness. When he woke again, the sun had moved across the sky, and shadows covered most of the ravine. He tried to push himself up but fell back with a weak groan. His horse was lying on its side, breathing hard. Daniel whispered soft words, trying to comfort it, though he himself barely had the strength to stay awake. He knew that if no one found them, they would not survive the night. The walls of the ravine were steep, almost impossible to climb in his condition. Time passed slowly. Daniel drifted in and out of consciousness, thinking of the open plains he had crossed, of the wind that usually kept him company, of quiet evenings by a fire. He wondered if this ravine would be the last place he ever saw. Just when he felt his hope fading, he heard voices distant at first, then clearer. He forced his eyes open and saw shapes above the ravine, moving carefully along the ridge. For a moment, he thought he was dreaming, but the voices grew louder. A group of Apache women had been walking the mountains, collecting herbs and checking traps. The oldest among them, a strong and calm woman named Nalin, stopped when she saw something unusual below. She pointed and signaled the others. They moved closer and looked down into the ravine, spotting Daniel and his injured horse. Many people might have turned away, unsure or afraid to help a stranger, but Nalin felt something stir inside her. She had lived many years, and her instincts were rarely wrong. She ordered 2 younger women to tie ropes and climb down. Daniel was too weak to speak clearly as they approached. They checked his injuries, gave him water, and comforted the frightened horse with gentle hands. The women worked together with practiced skill. They tied Daniel to a support frame made of strong wood and rope, then slowly pulled him up while others guided the horse with steady signals. It took a long time and great effort, but they managed to bring both man and animal safely out of the ravine. The women carried Daniel to Nalin's camp, which was hidden between rocky hills and fed by a small spring. It was a peaceful place, built with care, and surrounded by tall trees that protected it from harsh winds. The camp children played quietly near the creek, and the adults worked together in harmony. Many of them looked with curiosity when they saw the injured cowboy being carried in, but no one argued with Nalin's decision. Her word carried great respect. Daniel drifted in and out of sleep while they treated his wounds. They wrapped his ribs with cloth, placed warm stones around his body to ease the pain, and used herbs to reduce the swelling in his leg. His horse was also cared for, its cuts cleaned, and its injured leg bandaged carefully. As the night grew colder, Nalin stayed near, checking Daniel's breathing and making sure he remained stable. It took several days before Daniel could sit up properly. Every time he opened his eyes, he saw unfamiliar faces watching him with curiosity but not suspicion. The children whispered among themselves, calling him the man who fell from the sky. The adults kept a polite distance, though some looked uncertain, remembering the long history of conflict between their people and outsiders. But Nalin made sure no one treated Daniel with distrust. She had chosen to save him, and she stood by her decision. As Daniel gained strength, he began to observe the camp more closely. He noticed how organized it was, how everyone had a role. He saw that the camp was built on trust, discipline, and respect. He also saw something deeper. These people valued family and community more than anything. It was different from the lonely life he had lived. When he could finally stand with support, Daniel tried to help with small tasks. He swept the ground, brought water from the spring, helped repair a broken fence, and carried feed for his horse. He moved slowly because of his injuries, but he pushed himself every day. The children followed him sometimes, watching with wide eyes. They liked how patient he was, how he smiled at them even when he was tired. Nalin observed him quietly. She studied the way he handled the horse, how gently he touched its mane, how he spoke to it with calm confidence. She noticed how he never raised his voice, even when he was in pain. In her heart, she felt a certainty growing, a belief that this man had come to them for a reason. One morning, as Daniel stood near the horse, brushing its coat, Nalin approached. Her steps were steady, and her face held the calm strength of someone who had seen many seasons. Daniel greeted her respectfully, though he still felt unsure speaking to her. She watched him for a moment, before she finally spoke. She told him that the young people of her camp needed training. Training in caring for horses, in tracking, in safe work, with tools, and in discipline. Their fathers had been lost to sickness or distant conflict, and the younger generation was growing without proper guidance. She explained that he had skills they lacked, skills their people once had but now needed to relearn. Daniel listened silently. He understood the weight of her words. He also knew the risk. If settlers saw him living among Apache people, they might assume the worst. But he looked around the camp, at the children who had shown him kindness, at the horse that had been healed by their hands, and at Nalin's steady eyes that held no dishonesty. Nalin ended her request with words that stayed deep in Daniel's heart. She said, "You did not fall here by accident. The land brought you to us because you carry something our young ones need." Daniel felt a pull inside him, something he had not felt in years. Purpose, belonging, a chance to do something meaningful, something beyond wandering from place to place. He slowly nodded, promising to stay for a short time and help however he could. But even in that moment, neither Daniel nor Nalin realized how deeply their lives were about to change. What began as an accident in a lonely ravine was quietly becoming the beginning of something far greater, something that would reshape Daniel's life and the future of the camp forever. Daniel woke up on his first morning as a teacher in the Apache camp feeling both uncertain and determined. The sun was still low, touching the trees with soft light. Children and teenagers were already awake, moving quietly around the camp. They were curious about him, but tried not to stare too openly. Daniel felt a strange mix of responsibility and nervousness resting on his shoulders. He had taught ranch workers before, but never a group of young Apache learners who came from a world different from his own. He began the day by gathering the tools he needed: ropes, simple wooden training sticks, and a few gentle horses that had grown comfortable with him. When he reached the open space near the creek, he found the young ones waiting. Some stood confidently with their arms crossed, eager to learn something new. Others stayed near the back, unsure if they could trust him completely. Nalin stood a few steps away, observing silently, showing her support with a calm presence. Daniel started with simple tasks. He demonstrated how to approach a horse slowly, how to show calmness so the animal wouldn't feel fear, and how to read a horse's body language to understand if it was uneasy. The children watched carefully. When he invited them to try, he noticed their different strengths. Some were naturally gentle, their movements soft and steady. Others had energy that needed guidance, but once they listened, they improved quickly. Daniel encouraged each one with patience. He made sure no one felt embarrassed for making a mistake. Slowly, the children grew more confident. They began to trust him, and their respect deepened. Even the older boys and girls, who had first kept their distance, started paying attention to his calm and steady way of teaching. Throughout the lessons, Nalin remained nearby. She nodded with approval whenever Daniel guided a child with kindness or corrected them without raising his voice. She admired the quiet discipline he built in the group. She had seen many men in her life: warriors, hunters, settlers, wanderers. But Daniel carried a rare softness in his strength. The camp valued such a balance. As days passed, the lessons expanded. Daniel taught them how to follow tracks left by animals, how to judge the age of a footprint, and how to tell if a creature was injured or frightened. He showed them how to tie knots that would stay firm during storms, and how to lift heavy objects safely without harming their backs. He spent hours in the heat, repeating steps until each child learned them with confidence. The young Apache students admired him more every day. They saw him not as an outsider, but as someone who genuinely cared about their growth. Their families noticed the difference too. Children who once walked with uncertainty began to carry themselves with pride. They spoke about Daniel at night, sharing stories of the things he taught them. The camp slowly warmed to the man who had fallen from the sky, as the children still liked to say. Daniel himself learned from them as well. They taught him their ways, how to move silently through the forest, how to listen for distant sounds carried by the wind, and how to spot hidden paths that most travelers would overlook. He found himself growing more aware of the land. He no longer rushed through the world. He observed it with a depth he had never understood before. Nalin often spoke with him after the lessons. She shared stories of her people, of old traditions, and of the challenges the younger generation faced. Daniel listened with respect, understanding that he was not just teaching skills, he was helping preserve a way of life that meant everything to the camp. But life in the wilderness was not always peaceful. One afternoon, while Daniel was showing the older students how to calm an anxious horse, distant movement caught Nalin's eye. Shadows approached from beyond the trees. She signaled her people quietly, her face tightening with concern. A small band of roaming troublemakers, men who often took advantage of vulnerable camps, had noticed the smoke rising from their fire earlier in the day. The men appeared at the edge of the trees, watching the camp with greedy eyes. They were not large in number, but their intentions were clear. They moved slowly, trying to measure how strong the camp was. Daniel immediately sensed danger. He looked to the young trainees and used the hand signals they had practiced. Without panic, the older children guided the younger ones toward the safer side of camp. They moved quickly but quietly, just as Daniel had taught them. The troublemakers did not expect such discipline. They paused, unsure of what they were dealing with. Nalin stepped forward first, her expression firm and fearless. Daniel stood beside her, not as an outsider, but as someone who cared for this camp like his own. The intruders demanded supplies, trying to intimidate the camp with loud voices. But the united posture of Daniel, Nalin, and the trained students unsettled them. Daniel kept his voice steady. He told the men that the camp had nothing for them and that they should leave peacefully. Behind him, the young trainees waited calmly, holding wooden sticks for protection, not to attack, but to show readiness. The sight of so many disciplined and prepared youths made the troublemakers hesitate. They had expected an easy target, not a group united under skilled guidance. After several tense moments, The men muttered among themselves and backed away. They disappeared into the trees, frustrated but unwilling to risk a confrontation. When the danger passed, the camp breathed again. Parents reunited with their children, relief washing over their faces. The young trainees were proud they had protected their home thanks to the lessons they had learned. Nalin placed her hand on Daniel's shoulder, grateful for his presence and the confidence he had given to the younger ones. That night, the camp gathered near the fire. A quiet celebration took place, not with loud shouting but with warm smiles and grateful hearts. Daniel felt like he belonged in a way he never had before. People approached him, offering thanks, sharing food, and treating him as part of their family. Nalin stood before the camp, her posture strong as the flames reflected in her eyes. She spoke about Daniel's bravery, his kindness, and his willingness to give without expecting anything in return. She declared him a trusted friend of their people, someone whose heart had proven true. The camp accepted her words with soft cheers and proud nods. Daniel felt humbled. He had lived years wandering alone, believing he had no place in the world. But now he understood something important. He had been given a new life, a new purpose. He had found a home he never expected. Later that evening, he walked to the edge of the ravine where he had fallen. Nalin joined him, watching the stars appear above the mountains. She spoke gently, telling him that everything in life happened for a reason. Sometimes the hardest fall brought us to the place we were meant to be. Daniel looked down into the ravine, remembering the fear and the pain. Then he looked at the camp behind him. The children he trained, the people who had accepted him, and the matriarch who had trusted him from the beginning. He felt a deep, quiet peace settle in his heart. He realized that his accident had led him not to an ending, but to a beginning. And for the first time in many years, Daniel felt truly grateful for where life had brought him.